Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Clockedin with me, your host, Jordan Edwards. I'm thrilled to have you tune in as we dive into the dynamic world of productivity, success, and stories of incredible individuals who've mastered the art of getting things done. Whether you're commuting, hitting the gym, or just relaxing at home, this podcast is the go-to source for inspiration and actionable tips to level up your productivity game. I'm on a mission to unravel the secrets of those who seem to effortlessly manage their time and achieve their goals. So if you're ready to clock in and unlock your full potential, you're in the right place. We've got a lineup of amazing guests, industry experts, and thought leaders who will share their insights and strategies to help us crush your to-do list and make the most out of every moment. Get ready to get inspired, motivated, and equipped with the tools you need to supercharge your productivity. This is Clockedin with Jordan Edwards. Let's dive in. Hey, we got a special guest here today. We have Tim Calise. At the age of 23, he raised over $325 million for a hedge fund and had access to over $1 billion credit line. And then when you have all that and you know there's a stock market crash coming, he decided to give it all back. He's also been part of the executive team at GymLaunch alongside Alex and Layla Hermosi. And most importantly, he's a husband and a father to three. So, Tim, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, what was it like working so hard to raise all this money and then just to give it back, even though it's probably the best decision you ever made? What was that like? What was the thought process? How did your team think about that?
Yeah, so it's that was a point of my life where I was single. I had spent kind of two to 3 years kind of figuring out our niche and going and literally crisscrossing the country, meeting with different investor groups, and so clearly the effort and the sacrifice was there. But really, from an early age, I think it purely came down to the idea of I knew what we were there to do, and the hedge fund industry and investment management in general at that time was very much like the Wild West. And we were able to raise that type of capital, kind of being and approaching the industry a little bit differently. And I think we just were able to quite frankly stick to our morals. We were conscious enough and I guess smart enough at the time not to kind of venture from what we knew we were good at. Uh, but yeah, it was probably the most painful kind of financially big step back for us. But at that time, my wife and I were getting married shortly thereafter, and so it ended up being kind of a great closing of a chapter, and has allowed me to keep a number of very valuable and influential folks in my network. Who remember those days when I call them and ask them for a favor, typically they'll take my call. So it was a short-term loss for a long-term gain because I had a lot of years ahead of me.
Absolutely. I love that because there's so many people who are concerned about they might have a 9 to 5 job and they're like, I can't take a step back and make less money, let alone you're saying I've worked 3 years, blood, sweat, and tears and everything, and I'm just giving it back. But it's that long-term perspective that most people completely miss.
Yeah, it's I think in anything in life, there is no kind of linear direction, right? I mean, we're all kind of in an investment community, right? So, stocks, real estate, everything doesn't go straight up. There always has to be, and we used to call it we would always retreat to a position of strength. And in stocks, you'll see, prices will go up and then they'll come back down and they'll stabilize for a period of time before they go higher. And there's so many examples where you need that kind of consolidation period in your life. It isn't a trajectory kind of up and to the right without any kind of backtrack at all. And a lot of that is, especially in kind of technical analysis with stocks, if you see a price going, up and to the right without any retracement, the question isn't, is this going to go forever? It's a question of when is it going to come back to earth? And I think if we ignore the short-term sacrifice, if you will, to use that word, or short-term consolidation before we do something else, it's just a matter of when it all falls apart because it's just uh, unrealistic to believe that we can always make kind of one better choice in front of another without ever having a chance to build that foundation again and on which we can kind of build the next chapter.
Yeah, I enjoy how you took the stocks and related it back to your life. I think that's something that very few can do. So, Tim, where did your journey begin? Just to give everyone a little more context.
Yeah, to the great dismay, I have two sisters, and I was the kid in middle school who brought a briefcase to work. I grew up in a family where my dad was in professional services, so he was putting on the suit in the morning, going on the train to work, that kind of paradigm. And as a young kid, you kind of mimic what you see around you, and so I kind of looked and dressed the part as much as I could. But I realized kind of in the kind of early to mid teens that although I had a lot of kind of commonalities with that paradigm, I was distinctly different in that I always saw the world in shades of gray and saw problems to be solved. I was always taking stuff apart, not always good at putting it back together again, but I liked the idea of kind of understanding the underlying components of how things go, how they operate, how they're assembled. And so kind of that was my entrepreneurial kind of bent coming in. And so in college, I founded a late night snack delivery business. I went to school in Washington, D.C. And so that was kind of my first official foray into the world of business ownership and entrepreneurs. And then after college, I started that hedge fund or grew that hedge fund significantly. And then from there, got into technology and fitness, which was always a passion of mine. And that's how I was introduced to Alex and Layla Hormozi over at GymLaunch as a gym owner. And then I came on board and directed part of the sister companies there at GymLaunch. And now I've got the great pleasure of kind of packaging the last 2 decades of experience, all the bumps and bruises, proverbial and literal, to hopefully help the next kind of crop of entrepreneurs, shorten the learning curve and reduce that pain cycle that is inevitable anytime you you know, do something new.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I feel like so many people struggle with this, which is the concept that you were explaining, where you're like, I'm a kid. They want me to follow the rules. I kind of want to like make the rules and kind of change my own rules. So, how did you go about in college making that first business? How was that even started? Because there's so many people that think, oh my God, you have to quit and you have to go all in. And it's like, no, I mean, you could build on the side and we can see where it goes. So how did that work for you while doing college?
Yeah, I think the source of the question is a really good one, which is it's all about how we perceive risk. Now, if you're in a job that is gives you maybe flexibility and it kind of serves a purpose, and I'm actually a big advocate in the early days, that you should learn while you earn. You don't have to take somebody's got to pay the bill. You have to earn the education one way or another. You can pay it in tuition, you can pay it as time, or you can pay it with I'm going to quit my job and learn it, and there's a financial obviously kind of investment you're going to make until you can learn the things that you need to know to be successful. For me in college, it was simply that we saw a problem, which was we went to school. I went to school in Washington D.C. and in the area right around the White House, and that area is defined as kind of where all the political consultants work. A lot of kind of folks that commute in from Northern Virginia and Southern Maryland for the day. And as a college kid, we just didn't see there was nothing around. There was nothing open. 7-Eleven was literally the only option for us as college kids. Late night when we were just getting started. Going out for the night and things like that. And so, we felt it. It was a problem that we had, and we said, what if we created a kind of a late night option? So when you were coming back from wherever you were, if you wanted, ice cream and cookies and that kind of stuff, if there was an option for us. And so, in absence of someone else doing it, we decided to do it ourselves. And I think the kind of the core of the process, I think, is the most important part, which is we came up with the idea, or we realized the idea at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Wednesday. And by Thursday afternoon, the site was live and we had an idea of what we were going to do. And I think that is critical for anyone who's like, I wonder if I could do this thing. If you can validate that there's an audience and you pick the shortest possible way to validate your idea with that audience, you will save yourself a ton of time, effort, sacrifice, heartache of building something in a vacuum and hoping someone will buy it, instead of the other way, which is start small. If you have that 9 to 5, it might be the nights and weekends. I think we probably all watched Shark Tank, and there's those ideas of, I do this, from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. every night. Just start somewhere. find the lowest common denominator, the lowest entry point that you can for the thing you want to build to validate before you kind of take that next step.
Yeah. And I think that's so important, especially the action, because it's literally inside of 24-hour period, the action was taken. You guys could have sat there for 4 years, let college finish, come back, meet up at the 5-year anniversary and been like, still, no one's done this. This would have been a great idea. And that's how a lot of people live, where they just aren't in that action state. And I think it's so important to take that action as soon as you feel it. And like you're saying, the barrier to entry, super low.
Yeah.
Like when I started this podcast, I saw the opportunity when it was COVID, Zoom was picking up, and I go, $12 a month. Let's get it. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's the cost of Zoom premium and it's the cost of the provider, Buzzsprout.
Right.
$50 a month. I'm in. Let's give it a
Yeah.
whirl. Gonna meet incredible people. And people don't, they always go, oh, I don't get it. I don't get it. You got to get out of that fear of failure, that fear of rejection, and jump right in because you gain the confidence. How did you feel afterwards, even just starting the idea? Because it proves to yourself that there's so much more inside of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And a kind of shortcut way to think about this, there's two pieces of advice I would give you. The first is there are five core functions of a business. There's basically lead gen, which is how do I kind of create demand? How do I introduce myself or the idea to an audience? There's lead nurture, which is what if it's not an immediate sale? What do I do, and how do I kind of create ongoing interest and engagement with me? There's the sale, so how do I actually convert someone to giving me money? There's the delivery of the product, and then there's how do I retain them or keep them for a longer period of time or send them or what have you, after they've already become a customer. And so if you look at those five things, the question is, how easy can I make all five of those just so I don't have a break in the chain? So for us, it was lead gen. Okay, we're going to cater to college students. Heck, we're college students. So we called a bunch of our friends and said, hey, if there was an option to get ice cream and cookies and stuff like that late night, would you be interested? Yes. Fantastic. Nurture. Hey, can you go tell a bunch of your friends that we're going to have this late night thing and go to this website and give us a try? Fantastic. Sales. We had a website. It took us about 2 hours to code. We put some products on it, and we were off to the races. Delivery. We were part of a fraternity, and we had a couple of friends in our dorm. Do you guys have a bike? Awesome. We're going to use bikes. It's 11 o'clock at night. We can get around the city more efficiently on a bike. Can you help us out? We'll pay you minimum wage. Fantastic. Resale and Ascension. How do we keep people coming back again? Well, thanks so much for your order. If there wasn't something you wanted and there was something you'd love to see, please let us know. So Jordan, it literally took us 24 hours to walk through that and go, can we just figure out a way to cover the bases? Because especially in the early stages, the only metric that matters is the number of offers that you make. Because as we all know, perfection is the problem in most cases. You sit and you tinker and you think and try to optimize. Just take action. Make an offer. If you make a sale, fantastic. You learned something. If you didn't, so be it. Why didn't you buy it? Can I give it away for free? Okay, I can't even give it away for free. Chances are you're either not my avatar or my idea is not going to work.
Yeah.
And you move.
Yeah.
And part of that is just the idea, the thing that we knew very clearly, even at that time, it was like, we are not the business and the business is not us. If it's a bad idea and it fails, it was the business idea. We can come up with 1,000 more. We didn't fail. And I think getting over that psychological hump can be, that risk can be reduced by simply going out and pre-selling the thing you want to build. Like, hey, Jordan, I'm thinking about doing a course, and the course is on how to start a business without capital. I know that you start businesses. How does that sound? Oh, that's really interesting. If I charge $49 for it, would you be there? Awesome. Great. Do you want Visa, American Express? How do you want to pay for it?
Yeah.
I'll send you a link and we're going to do it in a week or two. I'm going to get a couple other people and we're just going to do it. We'll do it live.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I just did $500 worth of sales and I haven't even built the product yet.
Absolutely. And it's so powerful because the other thing is most people want to sit there and do so much work in the planning phases. Like this is honestly one of the things that kept me with Edwards Consulting and doing the coaching is that I had clients paying every single month. So when you set them up on these retainers and these monthly payments, for me, it was I have to show up for them. Even if I'm not recruiting new people, I still have to retain these people. And that's what people don't realize is because that's what becomes the part where it's, wow, we're seeing the feedback. So if you guys, first night, we get 5 people to reach out. Cool, 5 deliveries, nice. Next night, 20 deliveries, 50 deliveries, 100. You're like, okay, things are breaking. Problems are happening. We have to make more. But it becomes a cool cycle where you're like, this is working. And that fulfillment of going, I know this is working because you're telling the story. I go, the bike delivery. How many people would have given up on the bike portion that we have to rent a bike from someone? They've been like, we don't have the money. We're broke too.
Exactly. So I think at the end of the day, what we're all trying to do is to basically create some kind of value exchange. And so the question is, who do you want to exchange? Who do you want to enter into that exchange with? And what is the thing that we are, what's the widget? And if you just
Yeah.
think about it in that way, I just think we get into this. How can I optimize pricing? How can I charge the most? Maybe I can do this. Maybe I can't. Do the first 2 or 3 for free, and you'll figure out your kind of niche, and your confidence level will be higher. And then you go, okay, cool. If I got people showing up for free, maybe we'll charge $10. Okay, that was easy. Everybody still said yes. Maybe we should charge $25. And it sounds very rudimentary, but just like as entrepreneurs in general, we think that our next idea is going to be the biggest and the best and the last. Statistically, your first idea is actually never going to be your last. There are very few people that hit, strike gold on the first one. It's just like clients. If you think you have to get it perfectly from the beginning, you're never going to start. But if you look at it as a series of offers, I just fundamentally believe the people that win versus the people that don't are the ones who can go through the learning cycle the fastest.
Yeah.
And if you make it a game, if you're like, it's going to take me 1,000 times to learn, do you want that 1,000 to take you 50 years, or do you want to try to do it in the next 30 days? Okay, I need 1,000 interactions in 30 days. So what do I need to do that? I need to cold DM people. I need to call. I need to whatever. Like that. Now you can at least quantify the learning process. And you go, I'm not even going to look at the results until I'm through the first 1,000.
And that is so important what Tim just said there, because I was looking back on my notes from 2020 and I was looking at growing the coaching thing. And what I ended up doing, I looked at my notes and it said, reach out to 5 people. 5 people? Of course there was no progress. What are we talking about? I sat there and I go, this is silly. This is silly, because when you look at it and you go, oh, why did that not happen? Because you barely tried. You could you could literally fall over and talk to 5 people. And it's just realizing what Tim said there, the learning cycle. And people don't even know what that means. And then it's how many is in the learning cycle? What's a good number in the learning cycle? And David Meltzer said it when he was on the podcast. He talked about that concept where he goes, I know I'm looking for 50 no's. Get me some no's. I want the no's, because then the yes is coming, because that's the way you got to think about it. You got to rearrange it in your brain. You got to make it work. But if you at least know the journey, then you can understand step by step how to make it happen.
Yeah. It's, the progress is in the action.
100%
is the reality.
And most people don't even realize what action really means. Like with this
thinking
podcast,
about doing it, strategizing, learning more, reading books, that is not action.
Yeah, exactly. Like with this podcast, I've done like 150 episodes. Takes time. People sit there and go, how'd you talk to this many people? I don't know, 3 years. It takes time. Get a lot of no's, get a lot of yeses. You make it happen.
Yeah. Well, and not to mention 80% of podcasts stop before episode 7.
Exactly. They were talking about it. It was it's this one mastermind I'm in for podcasts, and he was saying basically Travis Chappelle, he was talking about the concept that there are incrementally more podcasts, but active podcasts have not changed.
Correct.
very minimal active podcasts have changed because so many are a one and done or a three and done or a 10 and done. Yeah. No, it's constant and it's
Exactly.
just it's not a judgment. It's just like whatever anyone wants to do. So
Yeah.
Tim, what gave you the confidence to go into this hedge fund space? Because I feel like selling deliveries to hedge fund, that's a big jump.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, kind of like in my upbringing, I was not only kind of the entrepreneurial kid, but my parents did something which I think I didn't fully appreciate until later in life. And they encouraged me to be the kid who could always talk to anyone. So I could almost become better friends with adults when I was a kid than I could my peers. I was the first person to pick, to answer the phone. This was back in like landline phones. Like our home phone would ring. I would jump over the couch to answer it. Like I just liked the idea of engaging with people, and I was never really afraid of taking the chance or what have you. And I know a lot of people right now don't like to pick up the phone at all if it's someone they don't know, right? Or you go to a party and you have to introduce yourself. That was never a concern for me. And I say that simply because it was a mix of I knew that I wanted to be kind of in the money world, but I didn't want to be an investment banker and I didn't want to be a financial advisor. So I kind of said, those are not for me. What else is left? And I was able to align myself with through a boss that I had earlier in my career. Made an introduction, and he said, "You're not long for this financial advisory world, but go do this hedge fund thing." And I just was probably naive at the time, but I also didn't know why it couldn't work.
Yeah.
And so in the beginning, it was just effort. It was, I'm going to go talk to people, which I was comfortable doing. And if they liked me and I liked them and I could tell them something that made sense, they would give us money to manage. I was like, that
Yeah.
seems reasonable. Uh, and so it was naivete in the beginning and just this, like, I just didn't know any better. But what happened very quickly, Jordan, which was in hindsight, I wasn't appreciative of, but I did it in like just by nature. I figured out what our unique selling proposition was. And at the time, it looked something more like the hedge fund world was the Wild West. Hedge fund managers at the time were these kind of like corporate types who were really high on themselves. So it was like, you should be lucky to give me money. And
Yeah.
from the outsider's perspective, I'm like, that seems backwards. And so all I did in the beginning, because I knew the people we were calling on were like high net worth individuals who were giving us their retirement money, I just made two very simple statements. I said, number one, I value the fact that you're giving me your very hard earned, very valuable capital. Number one, I will never lose it. And number two, I will communicate with you in whatever way, in any way that possible that I can, so that you never have to worry for a second that your money isn't safe. And that got us from 1 million under management to about 50 million under management. And just
Wow.
because just the law of numbers, the more money you manage, the bigger the allocations you can get. And so once you hit 50 million, then you can start getting, $1 million chunks. And that got us from 50 to 100. And once you get to 100, you can get $20 million chunks. And so it's
Well,
non-linear, just like most things. Yeah.
that's what I've also realized, that nonlinear nature of
Yeah.
business, because it
Yeah.
takes so long to get the first 5, 10, 15
Yeah.
clients. And then you're like, does this compound?
Yeah.
Yes. They tell friends. They go,
Yes.
it works. Talk to this guy.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's, psychologically early on, it's the same reason why it feels hard in the beginning. That famous
Yes.
phrase, we over appreciate what we can do in a year, but we underappreciate or some version
Yes.
thereof what we
Yes.
can do in 5. It's just because that first year is going to be hard. But here's the secret. Year 5 is not 5 times year 1. And I think as entrepreneurs, as business owners, what we sometimes run into is this fear of growth, because in the beginning it feels like we're doing everything and it's really hard and there's a lot of risk, which means if I'm doing $100,000 a year and it feels hard and it's risky and I'm stressed out, that if I'm doing $1 million a year, that I'm going to be 10 times as stressed out.
Yeah.
And the reality is that is not how it works, but it's hard to have that perspective when you're in the fight.
Yes. And that's the benefit of having mentors and people who have been there
Exactly
before.
right. Exactly right.
And when you were going through that with the hedge fund, who was your team? What did that even look like? And how do you
So
think about team too? Because I feel like that's a big thing.
yeah. So this is going to be shocking to some. So we managed $350 million basically, and we got paid on the amount of money that we actually invested. So
Okay.
short kind of primer, if you have $350 million in a bank account, you can go and buy usually two, three, four times that amount. Banks will give you money, they'll lend you money to basically buy more. So $350 million of money gave us about $1 billion worth of buying power.
Yeah.
Our fees were 2% a year on whatever we invested. So short
Okay.
math, if we invested $500 million, we got paid, basically 2% of $500 million, even if we had 300 million in capital. So you could do the back of the envelope. There was a lot of money involved, which is why it was very painful to walk away from. Our team was effectively our portfolio manager, myself, and three traders. So we had five of us running close to, over a $500 million book out of a 900 square foot office. And we were in Birmingham, Alabama, of all places. So to
Oh my.
say that it was a great gross margin and net margin business would be an understatement.
How
It
did
was a
you
phenomenal business.
now when you guys started getting larger and larger, was this something where you guys had to pretend? Because I know everyone's got that I'm bigger than I am philosophy in entrepreneurship. How did you think about that? Because probably getting a $50 million check when there's only five people on the team.
It at the time we felt like we were the best kept secret. We couldn't pay people to come and visit us because we're out of the New York, Chicago, San Francisco kind of route that most people were on. So we liked being kind of, and we actually said we are literally outside of the industry, which is actually one of the great benefits because we don't, you're not, we don't have the high dollar office and all of that kind of stuff. Um, but the lesson that I took from it was I learned through the experience that there are two types of businesses primarily. There are cash cows, and there are businesses you sell basically the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that don't make a lot of money, but you can make a lot, like tech companies that can lose money and still be worth $1 billion. That business had no resale value because it was us. And if the
Yeah.
manager doesn't go with it, there's nothing left. There are no assets or anything like that. And so we just looked at it as this is a cash machine. How do we optimize the cash profile of what we're doing within the construct of kind of what we needed to do to keep the business going and reinvest in it in marketing and operations and things like that? But I learned the value of efficiency because we were ruthless with our expenses. And so we use systems to replace lots of people. We built automations, and this was before all of that was really kind of very popular. Um, we probably cut our potential headcount in half just from having really good systems, and we spent a lot of time and effort there.
Wow. And most people don't realize this because in business, everyone wants the big penthouse office space with the view and the best city. And I think we
Yep.
all saw with COVID, it doesn't always help out. So I mean, your next move, it was the tech and gym space, and then you got in with the Hormozis. So what happened with the tech and gym space? Was that you yourself running a business, or
Yeah.
what?
So I was in Birmingham, Alabama, which I am not. I wasn't from there. We had built a house, but after we shut the fund down, it was like we really had no reason to stay, and we were starting a family. We wanted to be closer to back up in the Northeast, where my wife and I were both grew up. And so we moved to Massachusetts, which is where my wife is from. And I wanted to take a little bit of time off. I was burnt out, to be
Yeah.
absolutely clear. And my wife one day Googled, like personal training in the town that we were living in. And there was an ad that said some version of automated personal training on demand 24/7. I was like, oh, that sounds cool. And so they did like a free day. And so I went and got a trial, and it was this concept called Coco Fit Club, KOKO Fit Club. And they had just opened this like demo site, and they had built like a universal machine, like strength machine, but wired it up with all sorts of sensors, and it had a screen on the front. And you plug your key in, and it would say, good morning, Jordan. Today we're going to do these 7 exercises. Here are the ones you should do. Here's the weight that's appropriate for you. Here's the pace that you should lift and lower the weight. And we'll track everything for you and optimize it over time. And I went, this is really slick. Like this is before Peloton and Mirror and all the other ones, even before like
Yeah.
Fitbit. And I thought this is really neat. And I called the CEO. I looked up his name and number, and I said, "Are you taking investors? It seems like it's got some legs." He said, "Thanks, but no thanks. We're fully funded, but we just launched our franchise arm. The club you're standing in is our first brick and mortar location.
Oh,
Do
wow.
you want to open more?" And I said, "That's kind of interesting." And the area where we ultimately wanted to end up was not like an hour and a half from Boston. So was not a place that I wanted to kind of like, I couldn't build a professional life in as I saw it. But I said, maybe this is like my next calling is to start this kind of fitness
Yeah.
technology business. And so we bought a franchise territory. And in 2009, we bought that. 2010, we opened our first location. And we grew it to 8 locations over the next 6 years, and
Oh,
turned it
wow.
into a multi 7-figure business. And I was able to be present with my kids and have flexibility and all of those types of things. Uh, and the end of that story was I won a sales competition for one of the supplements that we carried, and it happened to be Prestige Labs, which is owned by Alex and Leila and GymLaunch. And so I won a trip to meet them.
Oh,
We're
wow.
literally sitting around Alex and Leila's dining table at their house, and it was me and 11 other gym owners, and everyone. It was like a consultation kind of visit. Like, tell me what your biggest problem is, and Alex would kind of help us work through it. And everyone was like, I need to retain members. I don't know how to staff. I don't know how to hire. And then it got to me, and I basically said, I have no idea like why I'm even in this business. And he said, you should basically sell your gyms because you're in the wrong vehicle. He's like, you're far too smart to do what you're doing. I was like, all right. So I went and sold my gyms. And that is the beginning of the end of that chapter, which then led into Alex calling and saying, how about you come on the team here at GymLaunch? And that was
That's
the kind of the beginning of that story. So talk about kind of walking away from something. Every single pivotal moment in my life has ended with like closing a chapter, literally and figuratively, and then moving into a new chapter.
that's incredible. I love it. I love the
Yeah.
fact that he told you the same advice that he got.
It was
That it's
great.
like,
He was just like, you're missing the big picture. And he literally used the words, "You're in the wrong opportunity vehicle," which is something he said a lot.
yeah, yeah, because that's what happened to him. Did you
Yep.
now obviously moving towards that was they've obvious Alex and Layla have blown up on social media. Were they always like that, or has that changed? Or what gave you enough trust where you're like, this guy who sells supplements gave me advice and I'm gonna listen? Like what caused you
Yeah.
to listen to that? Because I don't know if you knew them prior or like what do you think of that?
So the first experience I had was I, it became very clear to me, or it was very clear to me from the early part of getting to meet Alex specifically, um, was that he was smarter than most of the finance people I've ever met, but he looked like a lumberjack, which was very interesting. And this kind of like, at that time, this cognitive dissonance in my head of like, he's really sharp and he's really knows what he's talking about. But and in gym specifically, he was the best around. I mean, he knew exactly what he was doing. What I couldn't have forecasted was this idea of we were about to enter into the gold rush of attention, and being a walking, talking pattern interrupt would be kind of the golden ticket. So he has always been smart. He has always been driven. He has always, from my experience, always been the person that he is today. He just happens to be the right guy in the right time, with the right format, and he had enough forethought to start the podcast and start the content kind of creation process before it became kind of mainstream like it is today.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I realized is that you have to be early to situations, but it has to be based on your own likeliness, like your own enjoyment. How do you
Yeah,
think about these different themes or before something they say hockey sticks, like because as an investor it could be so difficult because you're basically put your chips with them. You're growing your family. Did you relocate the whole family to
I
Austin, or
did.
how'd you go
Yeah,
about?
yeah,
Like
we did.
that's
We did.
not for someone who's like independently wealthy, that is that's a challenging decision. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. So the way I would say this, the way the kind of content started, because I was there kind of in some of the early days, was it was purely the idea of documenting the principles that we were already talking about. And if you look at kind of just the leverage points I mean, most folks know kind of the GymLaunch story and Alex's story specifically, but GymLaunch started as we're going to fly out and actually launch your gym. That's how GymLaunch started. It was a physical
Yeah.
boots on the ground concept. Then it moved into kind of an information, licensing play, which was I'm going to package my IP and you can use it. Then it turned into effectively creating a better ecosystem for gym owners, which is why GymLaunch kind of went parabolic. It was, we figured out how to make gym owners significantly more money in the first kind of 3 months of working with us, far in excess of our fees. So our average gym in the first year would take home an additional like $40,000, which for a gym who on average makes $35,000 net, we basically doubled their profits in a very short period of time, which was kind of how that whole thing
Massive.
worked. But if you took those principles, which is a lot of what I've learned over the last 5-6 years, the principles transcend the gym industry. And so I think what happened was Alex wanted to document what he was doing and the things he was thinking about and the decisions he was making. All of that is still very valid to today. It just happened to be he is able to package it in a way that, again, makes it applicable cross industry. And he's obviously a very engaging person. So, I think between his likeness and how he thinks, he is one of the most incredible structured thinkers that I have ever met. And if you
Yeah.
watch the things that he does now, it's part philosophy, part business, part, being in the trenches, belief breaking, value system. Like it's remarkable just how his brain is able to triangulate all of these various pieces in a way that is incredibly unique. And that kind of nugget he happened to wrap in this content opportunity where he looks the part and he's the real deal.
Yeah. I mean, because when you really think about it, a lot of the people who have exploded prior to that, like have gone massive followings, were very controversial and we're not as business savvy as this, but we're more controversial in their own capacity. But this is more of a wait a second, I'm going to hit you with business advice and it's going to get you to think a little bit. And then we're going to question things. And then I'm going to leave you on a cliff note. And you're like, what just happened? Like, how is this? And then it's outside the gym. It's very, very interesting. And what was that like being around it for the 2 years, 3 years you were with them?
It was one of the best times of my life, to be quite frank, because it was being strapped to a rocket ship and it redefined and for me broke a lot of the ideas of what was possible. Either speed of implementation, playing the long game was a redefinition for me, which was I always wanted to deliver value and value in excess of cost and all the things that we kind of learn, kind of in the 101 level. But what Alex was able to kind of help me see was this idea of what is the bigger picture. So yes, we were helping gyms, but gyms also help. We also helped with hiring. We helped with now they were making money. We actually, Al Sharpin for folks that know him, a very very smart operator. He wrote something called the Billionaire Code, and the idea is kind of like how do you work through the different phases of your life personally, from being kind of a worker to being a business owner, being an entrepreneur to et cetera, et cetera. And so I think we were able to capture all of those different elements. And what Alex was able to do quite remarkably was to blend those in a way that I had unlike anything I'd ever seen before. And so it was great to watch. It was great to participate in. I pride myself on kind of doing hard things. We built a product called Allen, which was we took from 0 to 20 million ARR in less than 6 months. That was a project that I take a lot of pride in. We took it from basically concept or on a sheet of paper to an incredibly transformative business. And I don't think marketing agencies probably will ever be the same.
And just slow that down because I know you probably know it all the time, but ARR, annual recurring revenue.
Annual recurring revenue. Yeah. So we took a software product that recurring revenue was built to about $1.7 million a month. when we
And that's going from
in six
zero
months,
in 20 months, in 6 months or 20 months?
6 months.
In 6 months to $20 million annual recurring revenue, meaning every single year people pay $20 million, and that's without it compounding further. It's
And we
just,
were growing.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
just very, very. I just want to slow that down because that is most businesses. Like if you look at the percentage of businesses that even hit $1 million, let alone on a recurring basis, most people can't even manage to get another customer, let alone retain them and make it happen every single month. It's very, very impressive. And
But the piece to that, which I think is important to note, is we created a business model for marketing agencies through that software that allowed them to make more money. And it sounds simple, but we basically rewrote the rule book so that by working with us, actually paying us, made them more. So it wasn't a can they give us money, yes or no. It was by investing with us, they got 2, 3, 4, 5 times the amount of money out from the relationship than they put in. And that is that kind of value cycle of, so often we're like, can we just cover our fees, or can we deliver just above? If I'm charging $1,000, can I give them a little, can I give them a path to making a little bit more? We gave them a direct path from paying us, thousands of dollars to making hundreds of thousands of dollars very quickly and I think that was, and we did all the work, in that respect. So
that and
it was
that's
well
the
earned.
that's the most
Yeah.
impressive thing to me because watching the content, understanding the stories, you sit there and you go, you might have a very good model, you might be very hardworking, but you're just not utilizing the model correctly. So it's like, what needs to be shifted just 2 millimeters, just a little bit, where it's like, okay, you're making money only if we make money. And now it's a hand in hand. And now we're on this path together. And people are so much more receptive to it. It's like running Facebook ads or doing any of these different areas where it's like, how do you make more money? And it's like, if I give you $5, can I get $10 back? People go, no, that's impossible. Well, with this is why it was possible.
Yeah. Well, it's like I regardless of, I mean, Grant Cardone's a pretty divisive guy, depending on what your opinions are. But just the concept of, like, I think of a 10x idea. Take what you're charging right now and say the words, what needs to be true for someone to pay me 10 times more than I'm asking for right now?
Yeah.
Because
And
it's not whether you can get it or not. It's a question of what is the environment? What are the terms under which someone will do that? And in fitness, it was, we were competing against free trials in the beginning of GymLaunch. That's what gyms used to do to bring people in. And we came out and said, you should be charging $600 for a trial. And everybody looked at us like we were nuts, because the current paradigm was start them low barrier to entry, and then upsell them, the age old value ladder kind of
yeah,
idea. And this was Alex's genius. He said, everybody has it wrong. You charge the most when the pain is the highest,
yeah.
not the lowest. So we said,
Interesting.
let's charge the most. Like, people in fitness have been on this failure cycle so often, right? It was, so the conversation, instead of saying, hey, look at the equipment, do you want to try it? Which was the free trial version. It was, Jordan, tell me, what have you tried before? Oh, you've been to 7 gyms. What was that experience like? Well, I signed up and I never went back. Oh, interesting. So what was it about that experience that wasn't engaging enough for you? Well, I never really know exactly what I was doing and I felt out of place. Okay, so let me make sure I understand. So you want a place that you can fit in and feel comfortable, right? Oh, yes, exactly. Like, okay, well, what else? Well, I want to lose weight. But no, it's not just about, like, give me more. Well, I really want to lose weight because I'm like, and there's only a couple of reasons why. And I've done this sales conversation a million times, which is why I know it. And it's like, especially for women, it's like, I don't feel like my husband looks at me the same way anymore. Like, oh, okay, so let me understand. If you didn't, so you've done this for 10 years, you've paid on average $50 a month for 10 years. So you're like $3,000 into this already with nothing to show for it, right? Yes. Okay. How much would it be worth to you to have your husband look at you like you were 20 again? Oh my God, I would pay anything. Right. So let me tell you, it's $600, and I'm going to do everything in my power. I will move mountains to make sure that you look amazing and feel even better. Sign here. Do you see the
I
difference? And I think that is the critical element that I would share with people is this idea of we so often think in features when we don't think in benefits. What is the actual point of what we're doing?
yeah, it's
I run a
not
marketing agency or whatever. It's like nobody wants an ad, they want a customer. So how
yeah,
close can you get them to the customer, as an example?
I think what you're saying is so important because it's not focusing on what I have, but it's
Right,
focusing on what that customer wants.
right,
And it's funny, like I have different coaching levels and whatnot, and one of them has access to the podcast. And I always see people's face light up. They're like, "Me on a podcast? Who would have
yeah,
thought?" And it's yeah, I mean, dude, if we can make this happen, you could be on like, let's make it happen.
right,
But it's that's such a good breakdown because you ask two questions that are better. It's what does the customer actually get? And then like you were saying with Grant Cardone, what would 10x look like? Because most people are like, oh man, if I can get a 10% raise, let alone a 1,000% raise, like that's crazy. I just want 10%. Like, and
yeah,
it's going to be the same amount of work both ways. Like I had John Terracini on 2,000% raise, and he talks about that
oh yeah,
constantly. He's like, Jordan, why do you want a 3% raise when you can get a 2,000? Like you just have to understand these little pieces. So, Tim, I know our time is winding down. What are you up to today? How can people learn about you and what's happening with you today?
yeah. So as you mentioned before, I think everybody values a mentor, and so a great mentor of mine said the phrase to me once: "Transformations don't happen in isolation." And even in some of our conversations, that is translated into like, you can't read the label from inside the bottle. And I fundamentally believe that everything good in my life that has ever happened has happened in a collaborative relationship.
Yeah.
So I have gone out. So I do consulting. I help the next kind of round of service-based business owners, especially around this concept of recurring revenue, because that is what I believe the way that we should structure every business. So I have a great group. It's called the Co-Creator Community. And the idea is to take product, which is what most of us need to kind of use as the lever. How do we create better products to differentiate ourselves and create a category of one so we can get that 10x type of return? And so it's a great community. We do weekly calls, and it's all workshop based. So it's literally let's break the business model down. Usually in 20 or 30 minutes, we've rewritten it in a way that there's a lot more value to be uncovered, and then it's all about implementation. Ideas are cheap. You can go to YouTube and learn anything. I think the reality is how do we shorten the learning curve and allow you to avoid those foreseeable mistakes that usually doom a lot of folks. And so that's,
Yeah.
that's, I encourage anyone to join there. It's a phenomenal group. I do it because I absolutely love it. And you can find me at timcalise.com, TIMCALISE.com, and on Instagram and LinkedIn.
Yeah. And I'll throw that all in the show notes. And guys, I just want to
Yeah.
preface this. Literally in our pre-call, when me and Tim were speaking, he gave me tips on my process. Like Tim is the real deal. He's trying to provide value. He wants to help. And yeah, Tim, I can't thank you enough for coming on for past 45 minutes. It's been a pleasure and thank you.
Likewise, I appreciate it as well. If you go to Instagram, DM me the word Jordan, and I will give you a special gift for being a part of the show. So
Awesome.
don't miss out.
Thank you for reaching the end of the podcast. For that, we'll give you a complimentary coaching session in the link below with Edwards Consulting. Hope to see you there and have a great day and keep clocking in.